So this is the second book that I'll be reading. This is an ancestor, an antecedent of The Tunnel by Ernesto Sabato. This is another Argentinian novel, more so science fiction than a kind of mystery thriller that The Tunnel seemed to be. Very similar in scope and conception, but very different in structure. This was written, it was published in 1940. Sabato's book was published in 48. For some reason, I feel like this was earlier. So this novel has inspired, or novella, I should call it. It's not long enough to be a novel. It's about 90 pages. Now, this particular novella has inspired The Last Year in Marienbad, which is a French film. It's a black and white French film from the 50s. It's excellent and worth watching. Very interesting. It has uh, not as far as I've heard, but I feel it has inspired the surrealist painter Louis Buñuel, although he came before. But there's a specific film he has, black and white film. He has many black and white films, but not remembering the name of it. But it's a film where the characters, the rich characters in the film are having a party and all their friends are invited, and the servants leave before the party begins because they know something. And then the party begins, and somehow throughout the night, there's a realization that remains unsaid that they can no longer leave the party. And so they all begin to find a place to sleep and rest. And they stay in the house for many days, never with a reference to being stuck there. Or or eventually there's references that come up about not being able to leave. This kind of thematic presents a certain concept of immortality, or rather of suspended life without death. This has been a very disturbing concept for those who've understood that death being a transition, a passageway, a transformation. The spirit is something to be, for most of us, it seemed, for something to be expected and awaited for with with a certain naturalness, with a certain appreciation, perhaps. The concept of these type of books and films is related more to immortality as some kind of suspended animation where death is not realized or achieved. Now, there's talk of humans that death is not a natural thing. There's been talk of this. Many have talked about it, how we our genetic coding was tampered with, and thus we've been given timing deconstruct codes in our DNA, and thus we die at certain times. There's been talk that many of the earlier humans or beings lived to 800 thousands of years. Most of that has been exaggeration and confused Sumerian scholarship, or just bad scholarship, bad translation, bad understanding. But 800, 900, that's not, I'm more talking conceptions of beings living thousands of years. That's absurd. Certainly, our souls are supposed to incarnate in and out of bodies for at least 10,000 years. I think that's the usual setup of any soul, to incarnate for that many years in this third density time period. What I'm more referring to here is the concept of immortality as something non-human, something more vampiric, something more unnatural. And so the proposition of the story, the invention of Morel, is that immortality is its in itself is an invention. And the main character in the novella that I'm going to read is it's in diary form, and the narrator is a fugitive claiming to be hiding on some island off of Venezuela, claiming to be a sort of fugitive for a crime. And the story will learn what the crime is. And it's interesting because the crime in itself is a type of ending of natural human life. And thus the consequence is his experience, and it'll be the experience that we'll be reading, which is a kind of invention of immortality. And this will be set forth in the novel. There's also additional themes of human life also being susceptible to being some type of holographic experience. And that there's a kind of science fiction apparatus, projector, that is able to project human beings. So the idea in the novella is that somehow instruments had been devised to capture and transmit waves and vibrations. A machine that records, projects, and doesn't require any type of screen or papers. Some kind of projector that's able to reproduce human beings identically, almost as if images extracted from mirrors, with sound, touch, taste, smell. This is the concept in this science fiction novella. So it is the idea, it does correspond to the idea scientists, modern scientists have that, and this was a reference from another film inspired by the invention of Morel called Man Facing Southeast. Man Facing Southeast. This is a film that came out in the mid 80s. It was an Argentinian film produced by a famous, well-known Argentinian director. And in that film, there was a character who appeared under almost very strange circumstances to an asylum, to the head, the doctor of an asylum, and told the doctor that you are in the prehistory of the hologram, meaning to say that he and humans themselves were holograms, but he himself was a hologram. Now, holograms are a type of photograph that's obtained through a laser beam. This is an experiment that our modern physicists have done in laboratories. And what it is, it's like the ability to have images take shape in space. And this is similar to what Gary was talking about on alternative interactions when he was talking about, I think it's the slit experiment. And it has to do with the ideas of computers as well, of programming some kind of code, a code that has vital information in order to project a particular image. Thus, an image has that information that's probably related to the creation of images. And so the character in the film notes that we are images projected in space. So the business of the experiment is such that in a physics lab, scientists have been able to use laser beams to bounce off objects, specifically plates, and leaving an impression on the plate, and then to reconstruct the image using another laser. The object is then registered indirectly on a photographic plate, Thus, the hologram represents the object in a kind of code. And so the question that this particular film presents us with is, could people be photographed and projected into space? And the scientist in the film says it could be done with pulsating lasers, but that it would just be an image of its outward appearance. It would lack all other attributes of a real person. So in this story, we're looking at science fiction concepts that we now have. I mean, a lot of these kind of concepts we're questioning. The biggest kind of theme or popular theme of the day is aphotic Gnosticism and its claim that we live in some kind of prison decorated by astrological concepts. In the story, the main character seems to be hallucinating a reality. Now, as I read the novel, you'll have to listen closely because there will be very minimized parts of revelation. There will be there'll be a description of the scenography of the event of the novel, but there will be hidden remarks, not so much hidden, I mean, they're hidden in plain sight, and they will perhaps reveal an underlying layer of the story of where this fugitive is really located. And so it's even more interesting to hear knowing that context. Now, this cover here I have is an original illustration from the novel. I have it in my translated copy, which is an older version. And this is the character Faustine, a drawing of her, whom which the fugitive, the narrator of the story, falls in love with. And you'll see in this photo what's very interesting is you seem to see two suns. Now, if any of you have read Louis Sass's book, Madness and Modernism, this is a book that talks about the similarity between the states of consciousness expressed in literature and its, how would I say this? It's vertical development with human states of consciousness, with human psychology. In other words, psychology has gotten to a point where it can label, it has a designation for every expression of human consciousness. It can render someone with great metaphysical psychic sight, like a seer, into an episode of schizophrenia. Or a schizoid typical disorder can be characterized from someone who's a great artist. So the line between art and psychological disposition seems to have dissolved in the 20th century. It seems the development of consciousness has not come forth without certain mutations of expression or detriments of expression. For every mystic, there are many mad people. What we call them is, the many that are in institutions deranged, we call them failed mystics or failed psychics who have lost their hold on reality. And so similarly, in this novella, there has been much anticipated, much inspired by it, and sometimes without any acknowledgement. The famous film, The Shining, and its many recent reinterpretations. One by Jack Waldner. He has a documentary on Amazon right now. And I think Collative Learning has an excellent analysis and review of The Shining as well. And I'm talking about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, based off Stephen King's novel, which many of us already know was not very similar at all. I read The Shining, but it was too long ago to really make an assessment of whether it was inspired by something like this, by the invention of Morel. But to look at the film of The Shining, I can say in reflection that I can see some inspiration from the invention of Morel. And if you look at this particular drawing, there's this type of art was characterized in Louis Sass's book, The Madness of Modernism, as a type of schizophrenic art. I don't know how I would describe it. Maybe schizoid. I have the book, but I don't have it near me. So what you see in this again is two suns, and you see all these geometric lines and shapes going through the body, and also the body is shaped in very symmetrical shapes and lines. And I forget the exact type of art. This definitely was a type of early modernism, anticipating maybe a postmodern aesthete. And so I invite you to listen as I read this new novella. It's going to be long. I'm going to try and read it in larger sections than I did The Tunnel, but we'll see how that goes. And I invite you to take notes, write any quotes that seem significant. This is one of the most important early novellas of the 20th century. And I don't think I couldn't find it read online in English. Definitely there's audiobooks in Spanish. But there is YouTube's on it, so I invite you to explore that. Some look interesting. I haven't really watched any of them yet. I may read an additional short story, and I may put that out first so you guys can get a taste of this style of writing, which is very, I don't know how I would describe it. It's a certain style of writing for sure. It's almost like a hyper-conscious awareness. It's not streams of consciousness like early 19th or 20th century, but it's a type of proto-postmodernism, I would say. And so I thank you for listening and enjoy.